Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Back again to bring you Mythic Fetid Devourer and a healing guide for everything you need to know getting this boss down from a healer point of view. Starting it off, we ran with double Disc Priest on this encounter to make it a little bit easier to deal with the Corpuscles, which are very similar to what you had to deal with on Heroic. And the Mythic mechanic, of course, was the Mutated Mass, which is an additional larger pimple that we needed to pop before the boss ended up eating it. Going into this fight, you do still have the Malodorous Miasma and, of course, the Putrid Paroxysm, which it does turn into. So these are extremely long debuffs that deals increasing amount of damage when they turn into the Putrid Paroxysm, and they have a very long duration, which fits very well with Atonement's duration, and it's an incredibly spread out encounter, which also works out pretty well with Atonement, and the mechanics behind that. So the fact that we also needed additional damage while still topping off other players made it even easier and even more reasons to be able to bring Disc Priest on that fight. Not only one, but bring a second one instead of Holy. So that was the strategy that we ran. Now, general healer assignments for this fight, it's a little more difficult to have very set in stone raid cooldowns. Anytime the players are running over each other with Malodorous Miasma or Putrid Paroxysm, they will then apply those if they are on a clean target, and if somebody already has the dot on them, it will add a stack to it, increasing in damage. So spot healing is going to be incredibly important, not only on the tanks who have to be dealing with those terrible thrashes, but also going to be on players who are receiving increasing levels of stacks by stepping on top of each other there. Very important to make sure that you're staying as spread out as you can, and when you have to deal with any of the breaths or any of the knockbacks, that you're able to make room for your allies when possible, right? So spot healing is definitely a major concern for this fight, and the way that we spread out our room and the way we had our rough healer assignments put a lot of times individual pressure for you to heal about a 5 to 7 man group who would be dealing with a lot of the Corpuscles. So my positioning was near the boss, near the entrance, and a lot of times on the close side of the boss, whereas the other Disc Priest was on the opposite end of the room from me. We would have our monk more or less floating around and kind of filling in any weak spots that might be going on. Because of their high mobility, it really helped out a lot that we were able to say, hey, we need a little bit of assistance over here. Can you come over here at this point? And then float back to the other side if less healing or less damage is required or something like that. And they also applied the physical vulnerability debuff to the far side Corpuscle, whereas we had another monk to do it to the close side, right? So that was around what we did. The Paladin, our Holy Pally, stuck almost entirely to the boss to be able to spam heal the tanks. And this worked out really well for us in terms of having very firm expectations as to what each healer was going to end up doing here. Both Disc Priests had opposite groups to be able to kill the Corpuscle. The rest of the raid would end up collapsing before killing the Mutated Mass. So everybody was able to get topped off, and everybody was able to get into the positions once again before you reset and kind of rinse repeat, because it'll basically be receiving the knockback right after the Corpuscle spawn, getting into position to be able to kill them quickly, collapsing onto the Mutated Mass location, burning that down before he eats it, and then going back into the middle of the room for this rest position, more or less, right? So for me, it was about group 2 was most of my healer assignments, and making sure I was keeping those players alive. And then also important to note is the positioning around the room. A lot of times DPSers are looking to min-max their positioning, which can be pretty detrimental from the healer standpoint, because they're going to be taking up walls, any pillars, any nooks, crannies, corners, to be able to be in position to jump on top of the ads right when they spawn. You see, I ended up having to use Pain Suppression on myself when I got a double stack being knocked into another DPS who already had another debuff. So those things are always very big, and that you have to watch out for is positioning of everybody else, because they're going to put a very high priority on their own damage, because if they don't kill it quickly enough, then the fight is basically over. If the boss eats any of the Corpuscles, the fight is basically over. So in order to min-max your own damage and positioning, there's a lot of pressure to be able to put out a ton of healing before any of the knockbacks go out, and it may even look to be a little more overheal heavy in some instances, because you have to make sure that everybody's topped off, because there will be quite a bit of delay between getting knocked to the very entrance of the room, running back up to one of the pillars that you might see on like the blue or green side, getting into position of those DPS, being able to heal them and still contribute damage to the Corpuscle, right? Positioning is such a pain. And once you go through those 3 waves, I personally ran with a PvP trinket, an on-use trinket, so I could have it for the first and third Corpuscles and add extra damage there. Once you get past that third corpuscle, it becomes a straight burn, and adding as much damage as you can, regardless of what spec of healer that you play, is absolutely 100% required. You have to be able to do anything you can here. A couple little nice disc tricks and tips that you can do. The knockback, if you jump right before it, will actually knock you further away. So you can use this to kind of reset your positioning a little bit. Grips can also be very important to make sure people are getting out of the breath if positioning's poor there. But otherwise, this fight isn't too dissimilar from what you see on Heroic, and a lot of times it will be just min-maxing the positioning and adding any kind of extra damage that you can as a healer to help get this boss down. Hope you all enjoyed it, and hope you all found it useful. If you ever want to check out any of our Mythic progression or anything else going on in the live stream, it's linked in the description below or in the link right above. All right, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below in the comments. That's it for me. I'll catch you guys next time.